Welcome back to another GTN Coaches Corner, where we answer your triathlon related questions using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Drop them below our video and we will answer them for you. This week we've got a whole array of different questions, starting with what do I do about a higher heart rate in the heat?
And should I walk or jog my recovery intervals?
And how do I fit all the different types of training into 1 week?
Or which is better, higher efforts, high intensity efforts, or race pace efforts?
And should I keep my long runs at the same pace or same heart rate as I get fitter?
Let's jump into your questions. First one from Josh Barnes, says hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. Sorry to ask another Zone 2 question. We'll forgive you. I know I've answered so many already, but I don't think I've heard this one and it's started to become a problem for me. I've been doing a lot of Zone 2 runs recently and seeing good progress. But as the weather is getting warmer, they're becoming more challenging. I've noticed I'm creeping into Zone 3 a little more than normal. According to Strava, most of my runs before it got hot were around 90 to 100% Zone 2 for a 60-minute run. And now the temperatures got higher. It's starting to be more like 80 to 90% in Zone 2 for the exact same runs I was doing before. I know I need to maybe slow down and get my heart rate down, but is there a percentage that the runs need to be in Zone 2 when running for an hour, or is it okay to creep into Zone 3 for short periods of time? And if so, for how long?
I guess first off, well done for being so vigilant and noticing how much of your runs and keeping a track of that. I'd say also going from 90 to 100% down to 80 to 90% is pretty small. So I wouldn't start getting too worried about it.
Don't worry too much.
But in short, your heart rate will increase in the heat. So this is a totally normal kind of reaction to that.
Yeah, you will get a heat load which will increase your heart rate. Basically, the vasodilation sends blood to your extremities a little bit more, to your skin a little bit more, and therefore your heart's got to work harder to get the blood through all of those blood vessels that sometimes it would have limited. So your heart is going to work higher, your heart rate is going to be a bit higher in heat, and that's okay. Essentially, to simplify it, if you did your lactate threshold test to get your heart rate zones in the heat that you're running in now, your lactate threshold heart rate would also be 10 to 15 beats higher, and therefore you would have set your zones a little bit higher than they currently are. So you are kind of still in the zone. In fact, if you move to somewhere where it's really hot or it's the start of summer and you're going to only be training in the heat, you should actually probably do that. You should reset your zones based on a threshold session or a lactate threshold test in the heat, in the conditions that you're going to be training in, so that your zones are accurate.
I mean, I'll probably throw this back to you and say it would be interesting now to go and do that now. Obviously, it's getting hotter wherever you are in the world. And actually also seeing whether your pace is the same or does that pace drop off slightly. Be really interesting to see. So yeah, and then go from there, you could be more accurate.
Of course, you do also have to be kind to your body in the heat.
Yes.
You are adding another load, another stimulus there that it has to deal with, the heat, the extra sweating, the extra dehydration, etc. So if you are exercising in the heat, make sure you compensate for all those things too, not just the heart rate.
All right, next question from Hunter Flagman. Should recovery between running intervals be a jogging recovery or a full recovery? I've always done jogging recoveries. Is that preventing me from getting the full benefit of the next hard interval? Ooh, it's a good question. It kind of depends on what the goal or the purpose of the session is.
Yeah, very much so. If you're doing really high intensity efforts like VO2 max efforts and you're really trying to push up that aerobic capacity, you kind of want to almost completely recover in between the interval. So then a walking jog, even a stop and stand recovery is actually the best result, because then you can really push that next interval again and really push to a high intensity. However, if you're doing a threshold session or a tempo session where you're just trying to get your heart rate higher, the intervals, the recovery intervals, are only there so that you can reset your form, reset your mental focus, and recover a little bit so you can do more duration throughout the whole session, in which case you actually don't want to fully recover, because as soon as you start the next interval, you want your heart rate to be back at that threshold zone as quickly as possible. And if you've recovered all the way down, like with a standing recovery, it's going to take that much longer to just get into the zone you want to be working at. So that kind of answers that question, doesn't it? It depends what you gain.
And with those threshold intervals, as you get fitter, you can actually also start reducing those recoveries or jog recoveries. So
if you feel you're recovering a bit quicker, you just shorten the recovery interval so that it's more of a constant session. You're going to get more benefit from it, but don't do that too soon. You need to adjust first. Okay, next question. Marie-Louise Carlander. Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. I've done 10 Ironmans. Whoa, well done. The last in Kona in 2023. So a lot of Ironman training. This season, I will do like the pros, compete in Olympic distance and middle distance. but different reasons for sure. Yeah, I tried to add more intensity in my training. Tempo runs, 5 kilometer runs, James's ladder. Oh, nice. Bicycle with the men, and using swimming to push up my VO2 with things like 20 by 50s. I've always done quality workouts on the bike, my favorite part. But I really feel like the weeks are too short to have space for all the quality training and to get some zone 2 training. My question is, how do you balance this when you want to train to get faster for Olympic distance and middle distance over 15 hours a week?
Well, yeah, I mean, the weeks are short, and kind of similar to a previous question, it is really hard to tick all those boxes in 1 week. So actually, maybe think of it as not a week. Maybe it's 10 days, it's 14 days, and then it allows you to start getting...
Yeah, just because the week resets every Monday doesn't mean your training has to reset and start a new cycle. You can change the length of that cycle to 10 days, even 14 days, so it fits with the rest of your life. These are called mesocycles, and you can decide how you can fit everything that you need, a VO2 session, a threshold session, a tempo session, and your zone 2 work in one mesocycle, which is 10 days or 14 days, without cramming it all into 1 week. That's what the pros do. So if you want to train like a pro, train like a pro and actually change your whole mesocycle. It doesn't need to fit in with a Monday to Sunday.
Yeah, I think we've answered it there, basically. Next one from Alexander Bareth 19. Which is more important, high intensity or race pace intervals? I race middle and long distance, therefore zone 3 being my race pace. And I'm split on whether I should do VO2 max or zone 3/tempo efforts leading up to my races. I have 2 days a week with intensity. One of them is threshold day, and I can't decide what the other day should be. On one hand, based on the research and also my own experience, VO2 max intervals lead to a greater improvement in fitness compared to zone 3 efforts. However, it's also an accepted fact that specificity is the most important training principle, which would mean I should do zone 3 instead of VO2.
Well, Alexander's kind of answered their own question there, haven't they? I mean, essentially, yeah, you do have to hit all those things, but like the previous question, you don't have to do them all in 1 week. So you could actually alternate a VO2 session with a tempo session, race pace session the next week. So like every Thursday, and just kind of swap them week and week so you hit them both. Also, which gets you the most advantage is a kind of how long is a piece of string question, because it really depends on what you haven't worked on. If you've always done VO2 max sessions, doing another VO2 max session is not going to see a great improvement. If you've always done tempo sessions, doing another tempo session, it depends where your capacity is to improve. So whatever you haven't really worked on is the thing you need to really be pushing to work on. And once you're hitting a good cycle where you're hitting each of them regularly, then you will find that both of them push up your performance about the same amount.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say also, if you decide to go down the VO2 route and you start kind of hammering the zone 3 or the tempo efforts, given the racing you're doing, is still important. So make sure you get that in, as you answered and yourself. Specificity is key. Also, the VO2 intervals, be wary. If you're doing that week in, week out, there is kind of, not essentially a ceiling, but you will find your plateau after a while with VO2 intervals. So actually, the idea of mixing things up could actually be quite beneficial to you anyway.
Exactly. Work on the thing that you're weakest at is the best answer. Right. Final question, and it's from Salomek. Hashtag GTN Coaches Corner. After a few months of training, I'm now able to do my entire semi-long runs, 10Ks, in the middle of zone 2. What should the goal be of my long runs now? Trying to speed up a bit to keep the heart rate the same, keeping the heart rate the same, or lowering the heart rate even more whilst keeping my 6-minute 30 pace? Well, to oversimplify it, there's no Olympic gold medal for the person who kept their heart rate the lowest over a specific distance.
That'd be a fun event though, wouldn't it?
I reckon I'd be pretty good at that.
You've got a very low heart rate.
Okay, we're joking, of course, but you see my point. The idea of training is to get you faster in the zones that you are actually going to race in, or the zones that you're training in. There's not much point in slowly shifting as you get fitter down to all your training being in zone 1, because you just won't see any benefit, you won't see any improvement. You need to stay in zone 2, and as you get fitter and stronger, that zone 2 pace is going to get faster and faster, and you can either cover more distance or you can cover less, you can run for less time. We would suggest you add a little bit of time as you get fitter too, so that you're pushing that stimulus up too, so that you do keep getting faster. Because if you keep running 60 minutes or keep running 10Ks endlessly, your body will also plateau. You'll stop seeing improvements. You have to keep challenging yourself. So keep challenging yourself by increasing the pace slightly, and then also by increasing the distance slightly.
Great to hear that you're improving though. That's fantastic.
Cool.
So yeah, thanks again for all your questions. Please keep them coming using the hashtag GTN Coaches Corner below this video, below any video. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Goodbye.